Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Always appreciate a couple of minutes with Mike Triplett, ESPN Saints reporter. Good enough to spend a couple of minutes with us here on what's been a busy 24 hours for the Saints. Mike, thanks. How are you?
Oh, you finally decided to have me on now that the Saints have entered free agency?
Well, I mean, it's been a little slow, needless to say. Do you care to weigh in as to why the Saints have played it, maybe, or your reaction to how they've played it so far after Marcus May to what happened really in the last 24 hours?
Yeah. Well, it's funny to say they're being conservative or methodical or pinching their pennies when they tried to make the biggest move in NFL history for Deshaun Watson. But, I mean, I think the best way to put it is, value is important to them. They will make the big moves for the right player, but they will not just spend freely. And we obviously saw they were willing to let Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus Williams walk away, and they have not pounced on people, some players that are still available that would make fans very excited. Tyrann Mathieu, Jarvis Landry. I think they'd be great fits and would generate a lot of needed buzz for this team. But they very clearly have taken the approach that they still want to make the playoffs this year, think they're a playoff team this year. They're not rebuilding, but they are only going to spend if they think the value is right. And they are actually finally showing some, I'm forgetting the word, with an ability to be patient with how much money they spend.
Restraint
is the word I was going to say. Yes, thank you. So that when they made this trade, that was my first thought was, oh, here you go. Here is a way to add a couple of key players or package those two picks and move up for a top 10 player, a real impact player that helps your playoff chances this year without spending that money. And so I think that was the reason behind the trade they made yesterday, but obviously there could always be a part two to that trade if they package those picks to move up.
Let's elaborate a little more on the trade. What do you think they do there?
I think it's about 50-50 that they're planning to move up. I wish I had more insight. And actually, a lot of times the Saints don't let a lot of leaks out of the building, but they are especially they're especially that way when it comes to the draft. So they don't, they really try to keep their plans close to the vest. But I think it's definitely, you have to consider the possibility that they're doing this because they want to get into the top 10, and now they would have more ammo to do it with, although you could argue they could have just done that with next year's first-round pick as well. I would still be a little surprised if it's for quarterback. I will never rule out quarterback because until they find a definite long-term successor for Drew Brees, that's going to be priority number one. But I didn't get the impression that they loved this year's draft class. And, unless it's just a big elaborate smokescreen, it makes no sense to sign both Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. If you know that a couple days later you're going to make this trade and go up and try to get a quarterback. But I can't rule it out. I actually think if they are moving up, offensive tackle, I think, comes into play because that's a position where it wouldn't be just one guy. There are three consensus top 10 draft picks at offensive tackle this year, and they could like them all, or they could like two of them and think, now we can get within range for an offensive tackle. Obviously, though, if they stay put, I think one of those picks has to be at receiver, and I think I keep referencing Todd McShay because he used the right phrase. He said that's a sweet spot to draft a receiver in this year's draft class. So it could just be that they've been putting their board together and they like a lot of guys in that range and they want to double dip.
Does this have a feel at all like, I've kind of compared it to 2017 where maybe they feel that's where the value is and they have 3 picks in the top 50 and they're looking to
for sure.
Essentially, Mike, rebuild the roster the way they did in 2017?
Well, I think they need to. When I look at this roster, I keep kind of shouting down everybody who says, the Saints need to just tear it down and rebuild. This would be, I don't think this would be a smart time to tear it down and rebuild, because you would be wasting the last prime years of Cameron Jordan. You'd be wasting the last prime years of DeMario Davis. You don't know how much longer Alvin Kamara is going to be one of the best playmakers in the NFL because of the nature of the running back position. You don't know how much longer Michael Thomas is going to be one of the best receivers in the NFL. You've got Ryan Ramczyk. You've got Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, this is a really talented roster that has had 5 straight winning seasons and had a historic amount of injuries last year and still finished 9-8. This is not a team that you tear down and rebuild on purpose. So they're towing that line between, well, we're not going to keep our pedal, keep the pedal all the way down to the metal and keep spending and mortgaging the future. We're going to try to show some restraint salary cap, but they want to try to win this year. So I think the draft classes are going to be essential if this team is not going to have to face a rebuild in a year or two.
One more on the draft. What do you think the chances are? They have 7 picks right now.
Yeah.
That they use all of them.
0.
It's crazy. It's just
0.
what they do, right?
0. Every year, yeah, exactly. They can't sit still. They can't sit still when they see a guy they like. I mean, my favorite all-time trade was the 4 picks for Adam Troutman, and just being like, we're done for the rest of the draft. And then, of course, they went back in. They went back in round 7 later in that draft. But no, and look, that's they have had by far the fewest number of draft picks over the last, whatever you want to say, 10 years, 5 years, whichever grouping you choose. They've had the fewest draft picks in the NFL. They've traded picks for players. They've packaged picks to move up. And it's a philosophy they believe in. And one of the reasons why over that span is because it's been a hard roster to make. This isn't a team that has 23 openings on the roster this year. This is a team that probably, is going to have 6 to 8 newcomers on the roster that aren't already on the roster right now. So, they want to aim for the, quality over quantity usually is their draft strategy. But I do agree that their strategies and philosophies are changing a little bit now that they find themselves in this sort of in-between limbo.
He's on Twitter at Mike Triplett. Tyrann Mathieu, of course, was in the building today. Do you think they get a deal done?
I can't say that confidently because I think it makes so much sense that it should have been done already by now if both sides were motivated to do that deal. I think Matthew's price tag has probably already dropped a little bit. I mean, I don't think he's going to get the same size deal that Marcus Williams got, when I think a lot of people thought they'd be in the same range. Maybe he's going to have to settle for 1 year. Maybe he's waiting till after the draft to see which teams didn't fill their need and might be willing to up their offer. But he feels a lot like Teron Armstead and Marcus Williams to me, where the Saints do like him, but they've got a cap on what they're going to spend. If they were going to blow that out of the water, they would have kept Teron Armstead, I think. But I think it absolutely could happen. If nobody else is offering him money and his price goes down, or he wants to sign a 1-year deal and go back into free agency next year, he obviously seems to want to come here, and he would obviously fill a big need for this team.
What about the other sort of ancillary deals, smaller deals that the Saints have done here in the last 48 hours? Any of them seem significant or guys that actually you think may have a chance of making this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of them have a chance of making the team. When you're signing a guy early in free agency, obviously they might not all make the team. The one they just signed today seems like pretty much a exclusively special teams player. They've actually signed a couple guys that, Daniel Sorensen was that way too. He'll probably be mainly a special teams player, but they said he was similar to Jeff Heath. I think the guy they signed today is similar to Garrett Griffin. So I think they're just filling out the roster with some of those guys. But I think the one thing that has stood out most is it's been 3 really experienced veteran defensive linemen that they've signed. That's a position that I don't know how everybody makes the roster right now. I mean, I thought that might be a draft need, because that's when you're going to have to reload at some point, with Cameron Jordan now 32 years old, and Onyemata and Marcus Davenport going into the final years of their contract. But they have so many veterans they're 3 deep now at end and tackle. That maybe they feel pretty set on that defensive line, which has obviously been a strength of this team for a long time.
Mike, before you go, I had someone pose this to me, and it was an interesting thought. I'll just bounce it off of you. If Sean Payton coaches next year, the Saints are going to be compensated for that. Do they do this deal, this trade deal, maybe in the back of their mind thinking we're going to get picks for Sean Payton?
I've heard a couple people say that. I don't know if they can completely predict what Sean Payton is going to do next. I think he's made it very clear he wants to sign a TV deal. I don't know that they can be 100% confident that he's definitely just taking 1 year off from coaching. And once it becomes 2 years, if he's been out of coaching for 2 years, do the Saints still get a first-round pick for him? I think you probably move that draft pick down by a round every year that he's out of coaching. So that would be a nice bonus and something that could be in the back of their minds. But I don't think they could be acting like they know they've got a first-round pick coming this year.
He's on Twitter at Mike Triplett, ESPN.com. What an interesting time of year, man. The NFL, I guess, never really does sleep.
No.
It's going to be a fun few weeks, though, leading up to the draft 3 weeks from Thursday. I'm sure we'll bother you again. Thanks for picking up the phone, as always. We appreciate the time.
Never a bother. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.